Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the 50th episode from Half Century of Collecting Sports Cards. We're coming back to my favorite 400 cards again. Today, these were the cards we went through the last episode of doing this. We are in the 350s. This is number 357. And my card is a 1973 card of Oscar Gamble. Oscar Gamble was one of my favorite players. This is the first year I collected cards, and that card I think is just so cool because he's with the Phillies there playing against the Reds, sliding into second with a cloud of dust. And how does that head, it's Davy Concepcion standing there, but I don't know who is standing there with just the head showing. It's not Joe Morgan as the second baseman, but probably Daryl Cheney. But just a weird looking card of one of my favorite guys, the guy with the fro. These are a couple of his later cards. I used to watch, when they got on the game of the week with the Indians, that was very rare, but then when he got traded to the Yankees, I used to watch him just to watch Oscar Gamble, watch if his helmet would stay on. It's like every time he would swing, his helmet would go flying off. But he was a good hitter. He had 20 home runs this year in 1973, hit 200 in his career, and that was not in a lot of at-bats because he wasn't a real good defender, so he didn't get to play a lot of defense, did some DHing later, but he had a 30-homer season. And then I just thought I'd show, there's another 73 card against the Reds. This is Tito Fuentes, and he's the one there on second base, but what's he doing to... That might be the same guy, Daryl Cheney, underneath him. So Daryl Cheney ended up the victim on a couple of cards here. One with just a head showing out of a cloud of dust, kind of like he's coming out of the earth. And this one with Tito Fuentes getting the best of him. So Oscar Gamble, 73 card. Next we've got a 1951 Marty Marion. Love this card because he's in the fielding position. Just kind of a great color on that 51 Bowman. And Marty Marion was one of the best fielding shortstops of all time. In fact, in 1944, he was the MVP of the National League. And that year he just hit 267 with only 6 homers, 63 ribbies. He had a under 700 OPS, but he still won MVP because he was such a good defender. He had that year 3.6 defensive WAR, and he's one of the top career defensive WAR guys. One of the reasons I like Marty Marion, my dad, who I didn't get a ton of information out of during his lifetime, one thing I loved doing was playing catch with him, and I didn't get to do that a ton, but asked him his favorite ball players, and his the names that came out were Minnie Minoso and Marty Marion. So Marion kind of became a favorite of mine because of that. And I really like that card. Next, this is number 355 now on the list. And this is a football card. The first year I was buying football packs, still actually remember having this card as a kid. Mercury Morris, one of the fastest players ever. Running back who this year he was a 1,000-yard rusher in only 190 attempts. The year after this, he actually almost had another 1,000-yard year and averaged 6.4 yards per carry. Even though his Dolphins this 73 season, it was the 74 Super Bowl, beat up on my Vikings in the Super Bowl, and it was their, was that their 17-0 season? Either that or it's the year after. But Morris was a big player for them, and just what a cool card. I mean, and this one even kind of color matches with that pinkish, stuff on the ribbon there, and he's got the headband, the wristbands, blowing a bubble. Just a cool player, Mercury Morris. Here are a couple other Morris cards that I've got. Next on the list, we got a 3D Kellogg's card from 1970. Of Frank Robinson. Frank Robinson, one of the greatest players of all time. I think when he retired, he was 4th on the all-time home run list. Then had some real good years managing. 2-time MVP, both for the Reds and the Orioles. That first year, the Orioles after the trade for Milt Pappas, he won the MVP. I like the back of these Kellogg's cards. Still remember getting, I didn't get 70s out of the boxes, but later in the 70s I did. But I could have picked, these are some other 70s. They're just cool cards. And just kind of a little lesson, I've heard this one too. Mangini and Orlando both talk about it. Don't put these in hard, semi-rigid cases like I did with this Reggie Jackson, because what happens, as you can see, they crack. So put them in something soft, like this Lou Brock, and they won't crack. That Brock is actually really cool too. Or don't put them in anything, just kind of keep them stacked. So cool cards, those Kellogg's 3D cards, especially 1970. Love that year. Next, we've got a 1933 Gowdy, a Hall of Famer, Eppa Rixey. Now, Eppa was the all-time winningest left-handed pitcher for a long time. He pitched from 1912 to 1933. So this is actually his last year. He's 42 years old on this card. Kind of only the face a mother could love. But Rixey had 4 20-win seasons. His best year was 1916 with the Phillies, when he was 22-10 with a 1.85 ERA. Had a 22 season with the Reds when he was 25-10. But his 266 wins were the most all-time for quite a while, until Warren Spahn surpassed him. He still holds the record, I think, for all-time losses for a left-hander with 251. He was a smart dude. He taught high school Latin. So there's his 33 Gowdy gum. You can see one of the tallest players. He was 6'5" back in the 19-teens, 20s, and early 30s. Next, I've always said I'm not a real fan of these multiplayer rookie cards, but when you end up with 2 Hall of Famers on the same card, you got a chance to get on my list. And with Paul Molitor and Alan Trammell, they did make my list. This is at number, 352. Molitor, St. Paul, Minnesota native. Ended up over 3,000 hits. A lot of speed. He had some trouble staying healthy in the field, so he ended up DHing a lot. And then you got Alan Trammell, one of the better shortstops, with one of the better double play combos of all time with him and Lou Whitaker. Long career with the Detroit Tigers. Both Molitor and Trammell ended up with some managing afterwards. I actually have met and talked with Paul Molitor, one of the smartest baseball minds, I think, around. A very cool dude. Next, you've got number 351 on my list, and I just think this is a really cool card of Brooks Robinson early in his career. Card is pretty neat. He looks really young. Really like the 1960 horizontal design. You got the 2 pictures of him on the follow-through there with the bat. Brooksy is one of the best defenders of all time. He basically won a World Series MVP in 1970, that season, as Robinson was on that World Championship team as well, for his great defensive plays, although he really hit well in that series as well. You can see here he hasn't been playing a ton, but he's only 88 games that season, but he's an up-and-comer at this time, and ended up with an MVP season later in his career in 64. But one of the best players of all time. When I did my all-time third base series, was he number 2? He was up there anyway. So there are my top players or favorite cards for this time. I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, as I will not do another video before then. Take care.